Welcome to historic Beechworth. My name's Daniel. I'll be taking you on a tour of a lot of the less well-known historic sites below the ground. But first, let's start in the Burke Museum. We started 1852 with a population of 36, mainly shepherds belonging to our squatter David Reed. They discovered gold in that year, and we started the next year with about 8,000 miners, all scratching the surface, all looking for gold and treasure beneath what would become the City of the Hills. The first decade or so, the small miners mined in the centre of Beechworth, but they could only sink a shaft on average to about 4 foot in depth, and then they had a well on their hands. They couldn't bail the water quick enough. So the small miners were shut off from mining in the centre of Beechworth. They were moved on to other hamlets and other areas, and large companies had to spend a lot of money digging tunnels to drain the goldfield in the centre of town. Initially, the Rocky Mountain Tunnel was drilled by hand. It was going to be too hard. So it was a good thing the industrial age caught up with the town of Beechworth. We got sent out some equipment from New Zealand, still in their boxes. It had never been used. And that included compressed air to be able to use pneumatic power to drill the holes for the blasting. 15 miles of holes were drilled in the Rocky Mountain Tunnel, and they were also able to pipe ventilation air into the hole, so they didn't need to sink ventilation shafts. After the completion of the Rocky Mountain Tunnel, water was no longer the enemy of the miners, it was actually their friend. They set up high-pressured hoses, sluicing nozzles like this we used to dig out the centre of town using water power. Gold could be stolen from under your pillow while you slept, so a lot of people would guard their claims at night with man traps. They'd often have mangy dogs and would fire pistols every hour. Of course, nowadays man traps are illegal, but back in the mining days it wasn't unusual to find the miners setting massive man traps like this to guard their claims. Beechworth had a large population of Chinese miners. We had Chinatown up above where the lake is today, and the Chinese miners were known to dig circular claims more often than the square claims. One day the police had to stop a couple of Chinese miners who decided to dig a claim in the centre of High Street, which was then the main street of Beechworth. In the first 10 years of gold production in Beechworth, 153 1/3 tonnes was recorded as being sent out of town. This ball here would represent what a tonne of gold would look like if you were lucky enough to own one. Now we're in the Burke Museum. We'll go out and we'll have a look at the fascinating sites underneath the town of Beechworth. Just upstream from us here in February 1852, Powell and 2 Californian miners called Baker and Strickland found gold. That started the gold rush. A decade later, they needed to drain the goldfields in the centre of town, and their first effort was to dig tail races that you can see. That didn't quite lower the water table enough in the lower Spring Creek goldfield, so they needed to start construction of the Rocky Mountain mining tunnel. This mining race is 420 metres long, 3 metres deep. It was blasted through granite, and a man was killed during the blasting. Many people don't realise that there's a tunnel running directly under the town of Beechworth. Follow me down and we'll go have a look. In 1876, miners started digging this tunnel by hand. Eventually they'd finished the job with industrial equipment. It took them 3.5 years. The job was finished by 1880. They had a big party to celebrate its completion. So the Rocky Mountain Tunnel had succeeded in draining the centre of Beechworth. Water was no longer an issue for the miners trying to dig down the centre of town. In fact, now they could use water as their friend. They set up hydraulic sluices and started to earn a lot of money using the power of water to dig. There was a water wheel here that drives the pneumatics. There was also wooden piping that would pipe water across the gorge behind us and to the tannery. When the Rocky Mountain Tunnel was completed, it was considered the biggest engineering feat in Australian history. I'll just go for a walk. I'll see you at the other end at the Chinese Garden. This is where the water enters the Rocky Mountain Tunnel. When the tunnel was commissioned, the swamp in the centre of town here was no longer a problem. Today this has been planted out as Beechworth's Chinese Gardens to remember the Chinese and the large part they played in Beechworth's history. In 1874, the Beechworth Court had 61 registered licensed hotels, and many of those licensed hotels had cellars and many legends. The offices, the Crawford and Co. Conleys, were at the end of the alleys here. And I was speaking to a builder last night. He tells me there's a tunnel underneath one of those offices that heads towards the commercial hotel, although we've got no idea why. On the other side of the block is the Harper Veron Hotel. It's a private residence. Its cellar was filled in to sort out the floor heating. They ripped up some floorboards and found a Martini Henry rifle under the floorboards. Now, local legend has it that the Harper Veron Hotel in Beechworth was Ned Kelly's favourite hotel, and he stayed there before and after he was wanted. Here we are in the cellar of the Tanswells Commercial Hotel in Beechworth. Many of the old tunnels have been bricked up or boarded up or even filled in. This may have led to the ticket office next door, where they found a tunnel under the floorboards. There was a local legend that the Gentlemen's Club funded a tunnel from the commercial here to the Star Hotel across the road. The function of the tunnel was apparently so the gentlemen could get through the tunnel, go visit the ladies of the night across the road without being seen by people in the streets. Here we are in my childhood playground in Silver Creek. The tunnel I just emerged from is called Heaven. The lower shaft that drained the water from the other side of the hill to Silver Creek to be used with the hydraulic sluicing. The lower shaft is called Hell. The top shaft, Heaven, it's the easiest one to walk through, and it's 120 metres long. I hope you've enjoyed the tour of the fascinating underworld of Beechworth. Come up and have a look for yourselves. When walking on those bush tracks, watch out for the false mine shafts. You might find yourself underground.